Hello, I'm Dr. Max Gowland, the founder of Prime 50 and Dr. Max Health. I hear a lot of different things about cholesterol. Some are saying it's a precursor to heart disease, while others are saying it's actually quite healthy to have cholesterol. So let's try and straighten out a few facts. Cholesterol is a very complex type of fat. It's a waxy material in consistency which circulates around the body with many other nutrients. Surprisingly, I use the word nutrient to describe cholesterol, but cholesterol is essential for life. Most people believe that cholesterol is simply a bad actor. Without it, our cells would die, as cholesterol is actually required as part of the cell membrane to actually operate properly. It's grown a really bad reputation over the years, with many myths still circulating, both in the popular press and even in some health magazines too. But more recent science shows that cholesterol in our diet is far less important than previously understood. Cholesterol brings into the body the main building block for hormones such as testosterone, the male hormone, estradiol, the female hormone, and also vitamin D. You don't need to be a chemist to see the similarity of cholesterol to these other key biomolecules and how it can easily be turned into both of these with minor modification. It also helps to make the very important digestive bile acids that are made in the liver, which are absolutely essential for effective digestion of both fats and oils from our diet. So, cholesterol is needed to sustain life. It's found in various meats, cheese, eggs, though we don't need to consume cholesterol in our diet, as the body can make this internally via a complex set of 37 biochemical reactions. In fact, only about 20% of blood plasma cholesterol will actually come from the diet, with the rest being made in our liver from fats, sugars, and protein. In fact, we make about a gram, 1,000 milligrams of cholesterol every single day. And typically, we have around 35 grams of cholesterol in our body in total at any one time. As a comparison, we digest only about 300 milligrams a day. Put this in perspective, if you eat about 200 milligrams of cholesterol, this will only raise your cholesterol by around 4 milligrams per deciliter, which is a really small increase considering optimal levels of cholesterol are nearer 200. Also, the body is very clever in that its endogenous synthesis, that means cholesterol made within the body, actually slows down if we digest cholesterol in our food. This is one of the reasons why reducing dietary cholesterol makes little difference to total measured blood cholesterol. Unfortunately, some people do have a genetic defect which can cause the body to have very high levels of cholesterol, which need to be treated by medicines like statins or fibrates, which help address this disease. This is called hypercholesterolemia, which basically means high cholesterol in the blood. People can also be high absorbers of cholesterol or low absorbers of cholesterol. Likewise, they can be fast synthesizers or slow synthesizers. And we're also different when it comes to our biochemistry and how our nutrition affects us as well. But cholesterol is both good and bad. Since blood is around 92% water and cholesterol is this thick, waxy material and insoluble, it obviously needs some kind of carrier to solubilize or dissolve it in the blood and carry it around the blood system. So the body cleverly packages the cholesterol into really small protein-covered particles called lipoproteins. The proper name for fat is lipid, hence the name lipoprotein. And these lipoproteins are spheres of cholesterol and another fat mixed with it called triglyceride, encapsulated in more biochemicals called phospholipids. Finally, each little sphere or particle carries one large protein around it on its coat called ApoB. Just to make things a little bit more complicated for a second, cholesterol can be carried out or can be carried all over the body in a range of these lipoproteins. But there are a variety of these lipoproteins. Most will have heard of LDL and HDL, the so-called bad and good cholesterol, and there's certainly some truth in these labels. High levels of LDL can cause fatty deposits or plaques on the inside of our artery walls. This is called atherosclerosis. It is quite a slow build-up initially, but can eventually become a dangerous deposit, especially once the cholesterol becomes oxidized and later calcified. Then is the time when potentially serious narrowing of the arteries can take place, possibly resulting in future heart attacks, strokes, or other cardiovascular health problems. Having a high LDL is a risk factor, but as is usual with nutrition and medicine, it is never that simple, as those with low LDL can still suffer from serious atherosclerotic plaques. And also, those with very high levels of LDL can sometimes even escape with very little plaque formation. The lipid panel blood test will typically tell the doctor six main numbers when you have such a test. These include total cholesterol, which is the sum of all the cholesterol in the blood, including the LDL, the HDL, and also something else called VLDL, which is very low density lipoprotein. LDL also, this is the low density lipoprotein, which is necessary but not sufficient for plaque formation. HDL is measured. This is the high density lipoprotein, which helps carry away cholesterol from the blood back to the liver for disposal. And high HDL levels are associated generally with a healthier cardiovascular system. Triglycerides or trigs is another type of fat which comes from our diet. In fact, it's the main type of fat we ingest and the fat we burn as energy in our muscles. Excess triglyceride tends to be stored in cells called adipose tissues or adipose cells. And high triglyceride levels are also unhealthy to our arteries and are associated with being overweight, smoking, eating too much sugar, being sedentary, and also having diabetes. Non HDL cholesterol is another number, which is purely a calculation which adds up all the bad cholesterol, including the LDL and the other cholesterol called VLDL. Um, Another number is the ratio of triglycerides to HDL. This ratio compares how much triglyceride you have compared to the so-called good HDL. And the ratio is quite a useful number as it gives more of an overview by taking into account both bad and good fats or lipids. This type of so-called lipid panel has been used over many years, and there are various types of ways of calculating risk of cardiovascular events. It's not the amount of cholesterol, but the number of particles of cholesterol that is the main risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And this is new world thinking. Though the LDL level in a person's blood panel data is undoubtedly a risk factor for heart disease, it's by no means a direct predictor of cardiovascular problems by itself. The very latest science has now shown that the most influential cause of dangerous plaque formation is the number of particles of LDL and also the size of these particles, with smaller particles being much more atherogenic. For a given amount of cholesterol, then, it's obvious that if particles are smaller, then there will also be far more of these atherogenic particles in the blood. This cholesterol particle number can be analyzed in a blood sample by measuring a protein which is bound to each particle called ApoB 100. But this test, unfortunately, is not typically supported by the NHS, except perhaps under exceptional circumstances. This is a great pity, as many cardiologists and scientists believe that this simple measurement is the very best predictor of atherosclerosis and potential cardiovascular events. One surprising fact is that early fatty streaks can be seen even in children within their coronary arteries. But that discussion's for another day. The mechanism which most scientists agree on nowadays is related to how these particles get trapped within the arterial wall, which is called the intima. Typically, it's these smaller particles that can enter the wall, get trapped, whereas the larger cholesterol particles tend not to enter the intima, which is the inner lining of these vessels. This in turn causes injury to the intima, triggering the start of this atherosclerosis. The intima can also be injured due to turbulent flow, circulation of reactive free radicals, which are oxidizing molecules, high levels of a material called homocysteine in the blood, separate discussion on that, and also elevated blood sugar. In turn, the usually protective white blood cells, such as monocytes and T cells, then enter the artery wall, initiating an inflammatory cascade, which in turn can then become fibrous and structured um, as collagen and elastin starts to form a harder polymeric layer. This is when disease really can take hold and become a potentially dangerous plaque, which can either cause a vessel blockage or break off as a thrombosis and cause damage further downstream. Various treatments exist. We know the risk factors comprise activities like smoking, being sedentary, eating an unhealthy diet, being overweight, and of course, drinking excessively. And everyone can control these to some degree themselves, but on occasion, medication will be necessary. There are a whole variety of classes of meds. The first and the most well known, of course, statins. There's a range of so-called statins that are part of the statin armory, including atorvastatin or Lipitor, pravastatin, Lipostat, simvastatin, Zocor, and rosuvastatin or Crestor. And typically these are daily tablets, 10 to 80 milligrams a day, that are taken for life to control LDL cholesterol levels. And they work by inhibiting the synthesis of cholesterol in the liver. Some people will witness some common side effects, unfortunately, such as headaches, nausea, and many users do complain about a lot of fatigue and muscle aches. The muscle pain can be alleviated somewhat by adding coenzyme Q10 supplementation. In fact, many doctors add this automatically to their patient's prescription, but others, for some reason, don't. There are quite a few interactions with other medications as well with statins, such as warfarin, gout medications, and some antibiotics. Even foods such as grapefruit juice can interact with statins. Rarely, statins can actually cause increased blood sugar or prediabetes. It can cause damage to muscle cells, damage to the liver, and memory problems too, though these are quite rare events. Blood pressure reduction is another way of dealing with plaques. BP is a key risk factor for cardiovascular problems and arterial plaque buildup. Therefore, on occasion, blood pressure lowering medications can also play a really powerful role in reducing risk. Typically, a high blood pressure is 140 over 90, though this is dependent on age. The 140 refers to what is called systolic pressure, which is the pressure caused by when the heart is squeezing blood from its chambers. And the lower number is called diastolic pressure. And that's when the heart relaxes between beats and is therefore at a lower pressure. And the difference between the systolic and diastolic pressures will indicate the elasticity or indeed the stiffness of the blood vessels. ACE or ACE inhibitors are another class of blood pressure lowering drugs. Medicines like these will include drugs such as ramipril or lisinopril. These work by allowing the blood vessels to relax and widen, therefore, thereby lowering overall pressure. And these meds work by inhibiting the production of a hormone called angiotensin II. Like statins, these are simply daily tablets. Calcium channel blockers, that's another type of medicine, which also has a relaxing effect on the blood vessels and work by inhibiting calcium from entering the cells of the heart and the arteries. There's a wide variety of such medicines available to the doctor depending on exactly what's required. And these can work hand in hand quite nicely with statins. Beta blockers are another medicine that is sometimes used for lowering blood pressure and works by slowing the heartbeat, thereby causing the pressure to drop as a result. However, these have been found to be less effective in preventing heart attacks and strokes than other meds and are now not a first choice to most doctors. There are also water tablets or diuretics. That's another form of medication used to help control blood pressure and work by increasing the amount of both salt and water that is excreted, thereby lowering the amount of fluid in the cardiovascular system. These then tend to lower blood pressure. Thiazides are a commonly used diuretic and are good alternatives if other medications have proved unsuitable. There is a raft of other pharmaceuticals available to the doctor, which we really don't have time to elucidate upon, but this is a huge field of medicine and it's developing fast. And the lowering of blood pressure is such a key health biomarker to watch carefully and control where necessary. So, in summary, the main messages. First of all, cholesterol. It is essential for life. We need it. And most of it's made in the body, with diet playing actually quite a small role in terms of blood cholesterol levels. Secondly, cholesterol exists in the blood in particles, particles of so called lipoproteins, and they have a variable size and density. The low density particles, LDL or bad cholesterol, these are highly atherogenic, while the good or HDL cholesterol particles are a healthy form of cholesterol. Thirdly, it's not the level of LDL necessarily, but the number and the size of these particles which is actually causative of atherosclerosis and heart disease. But typically, this is not measured in a normal blood panel, unfortunately. Risk factors for atherosclerosis and heart disease are lack of exercise, smoking, being overweight, and unhealthy eating. But all of these can be controlled to some extent by our own behaviors. A range of medicines are available to control cholesterol levels and blood pressure, which can lower the risk of both atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease in general.